So, this is Cosplay 101. It's the precursor to Cosplay 201, which was earlier today. So, if you came to our special effects panel, you're already ahead of the curve. So, we're just going to backtrack that process up and get into some of the armor. So, we're going to some intros to our armor introduction, the evolution of armor. So, types of armor, what SCA is. Does anybody know what SCA is? 2 people? Okay, 3 people. That's more than I expected. Some cosplay armor examples, and then demo. We're going to skip the cosplay armor examples because we loaded all that back into our car from our earlier panel and completely forgot to take it back out. So we're just going to leave those in your car.
It's at the top of the parking garage.
Which part?
That's a great question.
Hello, everyone who was not here from our previous panel. The contacts I'm wearing. Hey, I have a question. I'm sorry I can't see your hand, but she can see your hand. My name's Carrie, Kamikaz on all social media. Elaina and I have been cosplaying together for, what, 2 years now?
Yeah.
2 years now. We started out as friends on Facebook that wanted to cosplay Sea Cats together. And now we're married, so it escalated quickly, and here we are. We cosplay together all the time now, and most of our stuff is a joint effort. So Elaina focuses on all of the, I like to say she does the hard material and I do the soft material. So all the EVA foam, the armor construction, the metal work, the electrical stuff, that's all her expertise, and then mine is more the soft stuff, the sewing, the makeup, the wig styling, and all of the detail work that we have that comes at the very end when we're normally crunching and I'm freaking out and it's 3 a.m. when I'm working on things.
I get to avoid crunching because I plan and build ahead of time.
And I'm like, you know, it'd be good if I changed my mind 12 hours before we wore this cosplay. Yeah.
So, diving right in, let's look at the evolution of armor. It's a very open-ended definition of what is armor. Does anybody know what the technical definition is? What is the technical definition of armor?
Okay, let's take that. It's probably in some terms definition of some sort of material that can protect one's body from any sort of
A material that provides protection. Which is interesting that the Army calls tanks armor.
Technically not wrong.
Yeah.
Technically, it's protecting your body if you're inside it.
So, armor's been around for a long time. Focusing just on the European style, 500 BCE, you're looking at leather straps combined in very simple forms, very crude, very rudimentary. 100 CE, you're looking at the first metal segments. Still a little crude, but they are tied together in patterns that allow them to have more functions. So it wasn't just fighting against swords, we were looking at defending against spears, cavalry. If you take one impact, slashing versus piercing, all those things are trying to be taken into consideration. Those emerged as warfare brought innovations into combat. Now what happens when you find better ways to kill people? Find better ways to defend yourself, right? That happened and is still happening even today. 1200s, you had the birth of plate mail. Plate mail is what you probably think of when you think traditional armor, right? Knights running around, full plate, 60 pounds of 14 gauge armor that you get knocked off a horse and then you have to have someone come and help you up.
Can't see anything at all. Yeah.
Nope. And then looking at 1300 to 1500, that's really what the standard armor is viewed as. That's your full body plate, and although the functionality stayed the same, there were drastically different designs. If you look at the Franco to the Germanic, all the way from the British style armor, the functionality was there, but there were very simple stylistic differences that set them apart. 1600s, what happened? Bingo, gunpowder. What happens to armor?
Useless.
Yeah, useless. You become a giant, slow-walking target. So, the entire thing shifted, and it went from heavy armor to more open, less constricting armor with a lot better movement, while still providing protection. Thankfully, in response to the development of gunpowder-based weapons. Leather armor. It can be light, medium, heavy, even hardened leather. Hardening is a very arduous, delicate process. I have broken leather into pieces before. There's nothing more depressing than boiling your armor, shaping it, sticking it in the oven, pulling it out, tripping over your dog, and then watching it hit the ground and shatter.
Oh, like a tortilla chip.
And then you just sit, you look at your dog, and it's just a moment of silence between the two of you, because the dog knows something is wrong. It
Doesn't know what's wrong.
but it can tell.
Yeah.
So leather is very versatile. It's one of my favorite to work with in terms of materials. It can be tied, studded, scaled. You can use it really in almost the same way you can use steel outside of doing rings. You can also make it as complex or as simple as you want. On the left side, you've got a more complicated set of armor. And on the right side, you've got a set that we've made for Amguard.
I like how you said there's a slightly more complicated one on the left, and it literally looks like an anatomical drawing of a skeleton, and then on the right is like a sketch that you did with your eyes closed. And you're like, yeah, there's a little bit of difference between the two of these.
Putting it together, if you're looking at trying to build armor for your first time, this is what I recommend you start with. Memoir is the most common armor due to its accessibility, its ease of construction, and its durability. When I say ease of construction, I don't mean ease from a time perspective. I would put this up there with chainmail and the amount of time you're going to sit there doing something over and over and over and over.
So I hope you have some good anime to watch while you're doing it.
But with that said, you do get a really cool functional piece of armor, and you learn a lot about the basics. You learn how to do long-term repetitive processes without losing your mind. You learn the patience behind making sure that everything is lined up. And a lot of those little details that it takes to build armor pieces that are more armor that is super simple, super clean, but looks complicated and really isn't. You can create your own stamp. So if you have a specific style of armor that you want to create the scales out of for Lenoir, you can do that. You can also order 100-piece blocks of Lenoir scales in bulk. 2 or 3 of those packs, I think one of them is like $35. So for under $100, you can make a chest piece of Lenoir, which is fairly affordable if you're looking at starting it, figuring that's $40 cheaper than a sheet of formula. Anybody use formula? Yeah. Thankfully, you don't have any waste. Like that's the saving grace of Formula, like 0 waste. So what if we want to beat something? Just like if you're gonna build armor, you may as well make it functional and useful, right? So then we rivet it. If you thought running thread was through it was a tedious process, this is just a little bit worse. So we're just gonna ramp up the why am I doing this scale. So riveting is a sturdier way to put things together, and across a lot of the various genres and the various games that we play, they provide a better level of armor and protection due to the metal bearings. If you're doing anything with dark on amp card, dagged gear, it adds an extra point of armor to any of your LARPing. The other cool thing is it allows you to get more of a binding around your body because of the way that they're set. There are a couple things that I want to highlight here. Don't do this on your floor. Don't do it on your countertop. I've chipped both of those. Get yourself like an 8-pound iron.
On the top of the dresser too.
Okay, that was a mistake. Oh, all right. So
there's 2 sides of the dresser. There's my side that looks like furniture, and there's her side that has pockmarks punched into the top of it.
I was in a rush. I was like, oh, these 3 studs are coming out.
Just real quick.
Hammer them real quick. And the little pocket thing that you put down, it's a little piece of metal, and then you stick your stud on it, and then you put a little metal bar on it, and then you just hammer the shit out of it. You want a nice surface under that, like an 8-pound anvil.
Yeah.
Not your floor or dresser. Yeah. So, why is SCA so damn important? Does anybody know? SCAers, people who are familiar with SCA, why is SCA important?
I
like say, but like make a safe environment for that kind of thing.
And that's one of the great parts of it. Not only does SCA kind of govern in the Americas the safety for reenactment, and everything from like Hollywood uses SCA. If you saw role models, that was Darkon and SCA. But the process of creating armor in SCA is traditionally practiced. It's not modern technology that does it. A lot of it is using the same systems that they've used in the 14, 15, 16, 17, and 1800s. And they did that so that they could create, you can't create an environment of realism if you don't do the process the right way. And one of the things that SCA tries to do is to create that process and that environment where you learn how to do some things that a blacksmith would do 200 or 300 years ago. And in doing that, they have protected the process and handed that down and teach you how to do that the right way, or I guess the traditionally correct way.
Traditionally correct in that America's only been here for a few hundred years, so we weren't here when armor was a thing and when plate mail was a thing and when all of those different techniques of blacksmithing were a thing. So they pulled that over from Europe and other countries so that we can still preserve that practice and keep that as a building technique.
Taking armor to cosplay. So, steel looks great. I love my steel plate mail. I love my leatherwork. I love my chainmail. It's heavy. Like, it is very heavy. My Feraligatr barbarian armor, the chainmail shirt that I made was 28 pounds. Yeah, it was great. So the shoot that we did that one at KatsuCon was late night, and
if you've ever been to Katsu, it's in February, and it gets the water at nighttime, it is sub-zero temperatures.
but you get one of two Katsus. You get 65 and sunny, or you get frozen tundra.
Yeah.
And the one before the pandemic was definitely frozen tundra. So we get outside, and the good thing about chainmail is it keeps heated really, really well. So I was great for the first 25 minutes. The bad part about chainmail is when the chainmail freezes, you're now in a freezer. And then I was in a freezer for the other 20 minutes. So going from armor into cosplay, you want to take less of the material engineering from SCA and from traditional methods and pull those new pieces in. So foam, warbler, thermoplastics, plastizote, polycarbonate materials. And then take into consideration that there are a couple of challenges. I know proprioception is a big one. I'll let you talk about that.
Oh, I better go
No,
keep
you
talking.
can-
Okay. Does anyone know what proprioception is?
Knowing where your body is.
Yeah, knowing where your body is in space. So a lot of the time, so yes, you definitely do not. A lot of times in cosplay, like if you have tails or a big wig or horns or some kind of large hat or a weapon you're not used to carrying around, it bangs into other people or doorways, and then you're like, oh shit, sorry, oh my god, sorry, oh yeah, sorry. Because you're not used to having that much of space taken up for your body or for the cosplay. So having proprioception as one of the pieces that you take into consideration whenever you're making armor is super important for things like bending down and picking up your badge when you dropped it on the floor, or walking through a doorway so you don't have to go through sideways, or having to have somebody open a door so you can walk through with a prop that goes with your armor, but now you're like, well, I can't open the door and hold this at the same time. So when you're sketching out and planning things ahead of time, if you do sketch your stuff out ahead of time, it's super important to keep that in mind. Keeping in mind, how am I going to sit in a car? How am I going to bend down and pick something up? Can I actually see with the thing that I've designed? And if I can't see, am I going to be with someone who could be my seeing eye person for the rest of the time I'm at this con?
And there are other little parts of proprioception too, like if you're wearing a helmet, how tall is it? Are you going to hit a doorway when you're walking through? I had a proprioception incident earlier today that I'm just going to leave at that. With the tails that we're wearing.
Yeah, well, someone's not used to wearing a tail and didn't have proprioception around the tail, and then went to the bathroom and the tail went in the toilet. So there's that. That's proprioception, knowing when your tail's in the toilet.
And there's a certain level of, with that proprioception, the fashion versus function. We know there's some really awesome anime design armor suits out there. Arizona Fairy Tale and her sword dress.
Amazing.
Gorgeous. Not functionally.
Completely not functional or practical to wear in any way. And There's a way to be able to take something that's canon, an artwork that's canon of an armor piece or a weapon piece, and then either change the scaling or slightly change the design so that one, you can walk or sit down or get through a doorway by yourself and not have to worry about that kind of an issue. But it takes a little bit of playing around with and trying to start small before you start adding pieces onto it to build a full set of armor instead of starting really big and then trying to chip away at it to make it more functional.
Yeah. There's a lot of issues that we've had over the years making armor that we get it on and we're like, this is beautiful on a mannequin, and we put it on and we're like, this is not functional at all.
This doesn't make any sense at all. So we had the same issue with the two pieces that we're wearing tomorrow, Leafeon and Glaceon. They're both armored, but in a different way. So Leafeon has a more traditional breastplate and pauldrons, and then Glaceon, I don't normally design armor, so when I'm like, oh, we should do this, and she's like, you can't, that's not how armor works, you can't just, and I'm like, we should try to do this anyway. No. So we made the beautiful breastplate for Leafeon, and it's carved to look like wood, and it's got moss detailing, fungi detailing on it. And then for Glaceon, I'm like, I want them to be opposites, like a spring and winter, and like this is very earthy and warm tones, and this is very sharp and cool tones. And so for Glaceon, my idea was, I'm like, what if we did a breastplate, but like the filigree that's on the breastplate, we just do the filigree and don't do the breastplate. And she's like, you can't do that. It doesn't have anything to attach to it. I'm like, but what if we did it anyway? I had this idea, and I'm trying to sketch it out. She's looking at it going, there's no way that this functionally works. We're not going to be able to figure out how to make this work. Well, we made it work, so you'll be able to see it tomorrow, but definitely cutting it out of the foam, I'm looking at it going,
you were out of your goddamn mind.
Oh boy, I may have, yeah, I don't know if we can, we'll see what happens with this, because it was a lot of foam, and a lot of cutting, and a lot of dremeling, and I was like, can we make this work? Or did I just have an idea that doesn't make any sense? So.
It still doesn't make sense to me,
But it works.
It's pretty.
It is sparkly and pretty, yes.
So, and that's designing the outfit for an armor too. When you start building your armor, you have to take into consideration all the parts of it from your cosplay from the ground up. So where your fabric choice is going to be, how do you design the thematic character functioning around what the armor pieces are.
And it's also important when you're making patterns for any type of armor, or really any type of anything that you're using a body pattern for, to be wearing the cosplay that you're going to wear underneath it before you make the body pattern, because a lot of times people will just be wearing a t-shirt or sweats or whatever, and you'll make the pattern, and then you're like, why is this too big, or why is this side seam wonky? Well, you were wearing a hoodie when you tried to make the pattern, and your body is not actually a hoodie, so it doesn't work that way. So a lot of the designing, like for the pieces that we're wearing tomorrow, mine is just a tightly knit wrap top, so the breastplate is fitted to my body with Velcro and other attachment points, but the piece that we did for Glaceon is over an evening gown, so it's a completely different fit, and the gown had to be finished first before we could even cut the pattern for the armor piece.
For like weeks, Carrie says, what can I do? I'm like, finish the gown.
Look,
Finish the
I
gown.
Yeah.
Finish the gown.
I finished it.
But there's a process to everything, and some pieces work one way, some pieces can go either. When you're looking at armor, if you're going to wear something under it, do the clothing part first. Make sure you know what your character's going to wear, and then build the armor around it. Because there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration for it. We can talk about that on this slide. Materials. So, fabrics. Fabric armor, you can actually do a gambeson. So if you know what a gambeson is? Also, what is it?
Under Armour.
Pretty much. It's diamond quilted fabric, multiple layers. What was it first used for?
The underlayer for chainmail.
Bingo! You wear it under chainmail, so your chainmail links don't pinch the shit out of your body. I wore a chainmail dress with a tank top under it.
Bad choices.
Once. Never again. Leather. You can do light plate armor, you can do scales, you can do brig. Chainmail links are obviously used for chainmail.
So there's a little, she has a thing about chainmail, so I'll just say this. I personally don't give a rat's ass. If you want to use foam for your chainmail, you do you. It's super light, you can buy the links pre-cut, put them together. just don't let her know that it's made out of foam because she has a thing about it. If you're gonna make chainmail, then actually make chainmail out of metal.
There's only one way to do chainmail, and you can't do it out of foam. You can do plate mail. It looks like plate mail. It looks like plates. You can mimic it. Darkmon has used the large plastic drums and cut it out, and then refurbish that in aluminum. That works, but there's something about the chainmail links that just don't work for me. Steel, yeah, 14 to 18 gauge plate mail there.
Very heavy, very hot.
Scale mail, heavy and hot, not very breathable.
No.
And all of that will need leather origamis under it. EVA foam. Do leather with it, you can do plate mail. Apparently you can do wood bark.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, one of my favorite things to use for the armor is the EVA foam because there's so much flexibility with the finishing on it. So having a solid base from a solid body pattern, breastplate or something like pauldrons, you can then just use that base and then add a bunch of layers and pieces on top of it so that it fits for multiple cosplays and you don't have to keep wrapping yourself in plastic to redo it over and over.
And thermoplastic, so again, Plastizote or blood plastic. So you can do scaled armor, plate mail, any type of proper armor design that you want, pretty much you can do out of thermoplastics. It's the fun part. Before we do that, anybody have any questions?
It's probably a stupid question. Where do you buy this stuff? Like the materials? Do you like buy it off Amazon or?
It depends on what the material is. So the question was, where do we buy our materials? So we're sponsored by TNT Cosplay, so we get a lot of our fun from there. Fabric-wise, Joanne knows us as the token lesbians.
Yes.
So
They're like, what are you guys building now? I'm like, I need you to cut these 10 bolts of fabric, please.
like the foam you're talking about. So.
The EVA foam, they sell it a lot of different places, and I have nothing against Yaya Han. But her little beautiful cardboard display things at Joann's that have the EVA foam in them are horribly overpriced, and you can get EVA foam a lot of different places for a lot cheaper. One of my favorite places to get EVA foam is Harbor Freight, because you can get it in floor mat rolls or thinner sections that are already rolled up and wrapped in plastic, so they're easy to transport and they're way cheaper. And Joann's is usually the place that sells out quickest for EVA foam, and Harbor Freight is not. So any kind of place that would sell any type of garage floor mat or any type of foam anything, I would rather go to a hardware store to buy it because it's typically cheaper because they're not assuming that you're using it for cosplay.
I just got into EVA foam this year, and I found a bunch at Michael's, but it's the same deal. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, they
There's
assume.
a decent variety.
Yeah, there is a good variety. It's tricky because you have to go to a place that's thinking that you're using it for like a household project or something, and not necessarily for cosplay because then they jack up the price. Just like on a wedding cake, you're like, this is a regular cake, and this is $12, and now this is $50 a slice because it's for a wedding, because that makes sense.
The other thing about a lot of the Harbor Freight mats that is not cosplay design is the millimeters of it. So because it's textured on one side, because a lot of it's used in garages and on flooring,
Which is what I use for a lot of this stuff, the texture that's on the inside of it. That's
it's hard to be consistent with that.
Yeah.
So looking at it from a construction perspective, start big and work your way down. So core pieces of your armor, 8mm, 10mm, detailing 2mm, 4mm, and then really find highlights, filigree, all of that. If you didn't know you could put 2mm foam in a cricket, you can. Surprise.
it's beautiful.
You can do some amazing filigree work with zero hassle. You just press go,
And the Cricut will do all the hard work for you.
and it does some really crazy work.
So I will say this, and we mentioned this in our last panel with the special effects stuff. If you're using a lot of EVA foam, definitely use a heat gun to treat it, because that's the best way to get any kind of detailing work, like if you're designing plate mail that has damage done to it, like different slash marks or dents, it's a lot easier to cut that with a box cutter or an X-Acto knife ahead of time and then heat treat it, and it will split the foam open to look like it's natural damage, and then at the same time seal the pores of the EVA foam so that any kind of paint and everything that you're putting on top of it not only has a smoother finish, but it also doesn't soak up half the paint you're using because it's like a sponge.
Any more questions?
Okay, I do have to say, but I don't want to take all the questions that are jumping about here, but do you guys have a practice material that you use beforehand so that you're not ruining all the harder money?
I mean, we have so much scrap foam at this point.
I freehand everything.
Yeah, she freehands, which is insane to me. I don't freehand. I freehand with fabric. I don't freehand with foam. But I would use a smaller millimeter foam because it tends to be cheaper than the really thick, expensive stuff that you would use for a full breastplate, and just sketch out what you're trying to do on that and use the tools that you want to use on that just to see how the foam takes to the tools, and then start experimenting with the other stuff. I found there are a couple of things through the years of building a bunch of different things and just process of elimination of what works and what doesn't, that starting with smaller, thinner pieces is a little bit easier to work with versus trying to heat shape and round a thicker piece of foam, which can be really frustrating if you're not used to it.
One more. Okay. I mean, let's say you're a guy with a white sweatshirt that came for 10 years session, black sweats. How do you paint or color the foam if it comes in straight white? Won't it, like, not come out the color you want or wear off?
So coloring it from white to what color?
Not white.
So it depends on what color you're going for. Give me any color.
Red.
White to red?
Green.
White to green.
Yeah.
So if you're going light green, you would do white, a 50-50 mix of green and white over as a base, and then your green. And the reason why for that is the 50-50 mix acts almost as a priming base layer, and then the green pops. If you're going darker, you would go from white to any type of flat gray, and then you would do the green on top of the gray.
You're using regular paint or like airbrushing?
Airbrush.
She mostly does airbrushing, but yeah, there definitely needs to be the heat treat to seal all of the pores in the foam, and then some type of primer, because doing a dozen layers of red is just going to waste your paint and then make it so thick that it'll crack if there's any type of flex in the foam that you're using.
Just so you know, you can also use rattle can. It will crack if you
I can't
bend.
hear, I'm sorry.
You can use spray paint as well, but it will crack if it bends.
Yeah, there are a couple of different, like the yellow one here is a plasti dip, so it does have, it's for outdoor patio furniture, but this doesn't have any flex in it. Like if I were to make a prop that needed to bend, I wouldn't use plasti dip because it'll start cracking where there's high pressure points.
So yours is foam and plastic dip and doesn't move.
Yeah.
Mine is 3D printed in airbrush and it also doesn't move.
Yeah, yours is hard as a rock, but yeah, this has a little bit of like squish to it because it's the nature of foam. But if I was making any kind of prop that needed to be bent or moved in any way, I wouldn't typically use a spray paint or a plastic dip because they tend to crack at the pressure points.
Let's talk about patterning for a second, because these things are a great example of super complicated props that look fairly simple.
Look fun.
When you're eyeballing what you need in materials, double it.
Yes. Especially if you're working with foam, definitely double it. Foam and trim pieces for detailing work, you definitely need twice as much as you think you do.
Any more questions?
So the cheapest stuff that I can find has that on craft store. How do you guys feel about like the full like sort of formats?
I've actually used that stuff before. I mean, if you can heat treat it and the texture side's not going to bother you because you won't be able to see it, I say use it. I mean, if it's going to flex and shape like a normal foam does and give you the same effect, why not?
Yeah, I had an incident where I tried to. Do you guys know Sweet? You guys experience your ecos when she has the leg armor?
Yes.
So, I thought I was it, and I made the leg armor, and I tried to put it on convention, and every single piece slid off my leg. It was horrible. Do you have any tips on how to make mental armor? I know that's kind of escaping.
So why don't you come up here and we will do our demo on the leg armor. On you.
Ta-da!
We have a volunteer.
You've been voluntold you're gonna get leg armor patterns.
Right. So we can dive right into the pattern demo, and you come up here and we'll do a pattern on you.
So, any kind of pattern that you're making, regardless of what piece of armor it is, you'll need plastic wrap, masking tape, a set of different colored like Sharpies or markers of some kind, and then paper.
And let's make the.
Let's make some armor.
Yep.
I'm glad that we're doing leg armor because last time we did this panel at Otakon and someone said a helmet. And I'm like, I mean, okay. Yeah.
I would make a helmet.
He was really excited to come, and his little kid wanted to come too. When he came to the panel, he's like, "Tell me about armor. I want to make a helmet." And I was like, "Okay, we'll take your hat off. We're gonna wrap your head in plastic so I know you're ready." Yeah.
So like the armor is a piece here, a piece here, a piece here. But I've seen people do like the patterns and
So when you're making patterns, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make with the plastic wrap and the masking tape is, one, they wrap way too tight with the plastic wrap, and then you're like, why is this armor so small? Because you didn't give yourself enough room and that when it's against your body. And then masking tape, people torque the masking tape, which Elaina will demonstrate when we're doing the leg armor piece. Instead of, you'd think like, oh, this is my forearm, so I'm just gonna wrap the tape around it, and what actually ends up happening is you get too tight on the top, and then a weird warp sideways by the time you get to your wrist, so when you cut it off, it looks nothing like your arm, and everything you cut will not fit your arm properly. So what you actually wanna do is layers of masking tape, which Elaina will do after this is wrapped in plastic.
We're gonna wrap it in plastic.
We're gonna wrap it in
I've
plastic.
done it before.
Good stuff.
All right. So part for you is that you wanted to look at articulated armor.
Yes.
Calf, knee, and
And
thigh.
thighs, yes.
So there's two ways to do this. There's a three-way where you have a calf piece, and then you have a knee buckle that has two angled straps of leather that go right behind your knee, and that's fully articulated. Does anybody know why you would put it attached to your calf or shin armor?
That is bending your leg.
Yes. There's two parts of that. That's one of them. One is so that the thigh can slide into it, but the second is when it's connected to the bottom, you can drop to your knees super quick. So when you're fighting with a shield,
You know, as one does on a regular basis.
you have to go to your knees.
Or when you're kneeling in Katsukon weather for that best picture.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have the articulated armor built to go up your leg, still protect your kneecap and your thigh, and you also have it to where you're sitting on it. So you're not driving your knee right into the ground.
So I think it's important, like a lot of people will see this panel and they're like, cool, I'm gonna learn how to make armor, but they don't really understand like the history of armor, and knowing the functionality of it and history of armor is super helpful when you're trying to build your own.
Where do you want?
Alright, over here.
Yep.
Wrap is a bit of a pain in the ass to work with. So my recommendation is take long strips and then wrap. And let it come out. And then wrap.
So it's still one continuous piece of plastic, but she's not wrapping it as tight as it can go. She's pulling it out, leaving a little bit of room, and then patting it
So
in.
now, where there's places where I know there's going to be extra padding, go there.
I didn't allow for that.
So you use extra wrap in the places where you figure there would be extra padding.
Yep.
So like behind the knee or whatever, where it's gonna.
Extra padding or extra flex, like around a knee joint, you want to have extra room to work with, so when you're walking, you don't have to stay stiff-legged to keep your leg armor on.
So you want the extra space on the front of the leg because that's where it's gonna bend.
And then depending on which body joint it is, can kind of vary how you would layer the plastic. Like a pauldron's more extensive in terms of wrapping yourself in plastic, because a lot of people will try and just wrap the shoulder part, and that's not how you get the full shape and articulation of a pauldron. It needs to sit on the cap of your shoulder and be able to lift and move forward and back, which a lot of people don't account for. So wrapping for a pauldron actually comes up and over your chest and around your back, and then up and over the other side of your chest, and basically turns it into a vest, and then you tape it so you get the actual shape of your shoulder.
All right. One fun pro tip from doing this a lot of times: do your lines from the inside out or the bottom up. The reason for that is when the tape overlaps, when you draw, you usually draw from the top down, right? Well, if you do that and you go from the top down, it's going to be clink, 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 clink on
Just
every
put
piece of
zigzags down your sketch.
So,
I'm gonna rip tape for you.
I love that. We don't torque, and we do the individual pieces. So, one piece here, and then we'll do the side piece right about there. And then we're going to do one right across the middle of the knee. This gives us the space where we would see the articulated joint, and where we're going to do the strappings. Now, the reason why we have multiple markers is because we want everything to be seen on our pattern. So, not only the armor where it's at, where are we putting any lights, where are we putting any wiring, where are we putting all the strap pieces. All of that will be drawn on our original pattern while it's on our bodies.
Sorry, I got messed up.
Kind of hard to mess up tape. On Wednesday night, we got home and we're working on the cage, and Carrie got my entire body wrapped in it. It's a full
Well, she was in a winter gown, and she's like, well, my thighs are sweating immediately, so if we could do this pattern fast, that'd be great.
But it's an interesting one because it goes across the top of my shoulders and then meets up my low back, so there's nothing across my back. And I get everything taped, I can't move. Goes and says, okay, what's next? I was like, this is your design. Here's your marker.
But I don't know if this will work. Sticking this up now. Sorry, I failed.
Extra wide tape, definitely required. Otherwise, you get like 500 strips, and that's just a pain.
Also, I will add this little fun tip. If you do go buy tape and all the stuff to make armor, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that like a month from now, and you leave the tape in your car, the adhesive on the tape will melt and get really gummy, and then almost not tear at all. It'll just be little shredded ribbons of tape, and you can't use it anymore. So take it out of your car.
Yep.
That's it.
See, I don't do electrical, so
Can I have the wireless mic? Here, let me hand you one wire.
here's the wired one. See if this needs a battery.
Has anybody seen this done before? If you haven't and you want to come up and take a look at it, more than welcome to come up and see it.
Like
Take a look.
I was going to then she said that.
You're not putting it on the back side.
No, that is correct.
I just have a lot of questions.
Because we're going to draw on it.
You're you're going to draw on it, and what happens is if you try and draw it on a 2D surface, but you're trying to do it for a 3-dimensional figure, it doesn't come out right. But if you tape it, it holds. If you tape it, it'll hold the 3D shape after the sketch, so when you cut it out, you can flatten the pattern and make it 2-dimensional so it'll fit your play.
Alright, yep. So you pull part, and then we're just going to go straight down, side. And that kind of locks all of it in. But it also gives us a chance to come in here and just fill in any last pieces. So we know thigh armor covers the thighs, right? So we're going to want to take that back just a couple more inches.
It's better to have a little extra tape around the area that you're trying to create a pattern for than try and make it exact, so then you have a little bit of wiggle room.
All the way to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing. Now, the place that's going to be connected the closest is going to be at your ankles. So that's going to sit right above your ankle bones. Straight line.
Things you're going to do today. Yes. Let's wrap your head. Well, then a lot of people are like, yeah, let's see a helmet. We're like, who's taking their wig off? And everyone said, no. I'm like, all right, who's not wearing a wig?
All right. I like these 3 colors: gold, silver, and this little red one. I use the little red one for any type of electrical wiring that I'm doing. Yes, I put all of my electronic diagrams right on the armor. If you haven't done this before, try it next time. If you're going to do any electrical work, take into consideration that you're going to have to run wiring through it. Especially if you're adding lights or details to any of your armor pieces.
Because you need some room underneath it for the wiring.
Alright, so let's get to drawing. Right down. Alright, so we have 3 pieces here. We had a knee piece. Kneecap's right there, so top of the knee here. Flex your ankle. Alright, so 1 inch up. And the reason why we do about an inch up is because we want to give for the moving and the articulation of your ankle. I paid attention to all this class.
You did pay attention now.
And finally, I'm using my massage training. Alright, so top of the calf, flex forward. Right there. Top of the knee right here. So we're going to take that up probably another 2 inches. So this is where the knee piece would be if you attach on top, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take one line straight up. This piece, we're going to see this nice line on the outside of the calf. Straight down the calf line. Right side there.
Also, don't be afraid to use a measuring tape like a normal person, like I would. She's normally like, yeah, no, that's about right. I'm like, what kind of measurement? This is not a measurement. This is just fingers.
My hand is definitely my favorite measuring tape.
There are so many times when we were building the Leafeon and Glaceon for tomorrow that I'm like mid blow drying my hair, and she's like, hold on, okay, yeah, no, that's about right. And I'm like, for what? How are you building anything?
Memorize the length of your fingers and then use that as a board.
And apparently memorize the length of my body.
So, now we have the knee piece. And the cool thing about doing pieces like this is that once you have them down, then you can do all the detail in it. So we're going to take a line here.
And I know Elaina mentioned leaving markations for the electrical work, but also for the attachment points as well. A lot of times what happens after you take a 3D pattern off of somebody's body and then you flatten it out, sometimes it's like, okay, wait, which way did this go? Which side's right and left? What's the top and the bottom? And I have no idea what goes where anymore. And then if you forget where the attachment points go,
Absolutely. Exactly.
Sure.
So, like, what I see, like, when I watch videos on like play, something like that, like, I see them use duct tape too. Like, is there a difference?
You see what?
They use like duct tape also, like.
So a lot of reasons why people will use duct tape is they will take the duct tape and then they will stuff it with fluff.
Gotcha.
And that will fill it like a body pattern. But that is not a replacement for a mannequin.
Yeah.
You can one of
I also feel like duct tape is stronger, so when you're cutting it out to make a two-dimensional pattern, it's a lot nicer to cut out. But I feel like personally it's more pain in the butt to use to even put it on. You're like, hold on, let me cut this.
Yeah.
Okay, and let me cut this. Like, it's not a real quick ripping of masking tape.
Every time I see other people doing duct tape, like, it's like, oh, masking tape, I didn't really think about that.
A lot easier to use.
Energy just really like we didn't have confidence, so I was just like, oh.
Well,
so the reason why we did it this way and the reason I got into this is because the piece will come around and it feels easier to have like this. So they don't have to worry about the entire extra piece. The piece is all just one piece. All you have to do is have this here.
best assistant. Thank you. I'm like, who has cosplay emergency sisters, please?
Alright, so the original question was, how do we build a knee piece into the armor so that it's not 3 pieces? Turn this direction. The answer for that is to actually design the knee piece here into the cap design. So on the sides, actually runs up and then comes up into the knee piece. So the knee component is built into your shins. That was one piece. It'll look like 2 pieces because you have it articulated differently, but it's not actually articulated any differently. Make sense? Now, the second part of this way, is right here. These are your belt buckles because we only use leather for strapping here.
There we go.
Or you can use Velcro or nylon. Just, yeah.
We do leather strapping. Extend that back too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so you can take this and then draw it all the way back, or just connect it. So when you do your pattern, you've got 2.5 inches on the back. You can just do an extra 3/4 inch on each side.
Yeah.
And you can do zipper on EVA foam.
Yeah. I'll also say if you're like, cool, I'm gonna do one bracer pattern, or I'm gonna do one shin guard pattern, and then I'll just copy the same thing in reverse on the other leg. Don't do that. Please don't do that. One of your arms is bigger than the other, and one of your legs is bigger than the other. Even if it's just by a couple of centimeters, you'll go from having a super tight bracer that's uncomfortable that you don't want to wear with your cosplay, or one that's loose and flops all over the place. So just take the time to do each one of the body parts separately, and then mark which one is which.
For the love of God, when you build your armor, put left and right on them.
Left and right. I was like, do not snip those tights.
I was literally just like, oh yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, well, alright.
JK.
That's how it goes though.
That was hard.
Alright.
No, but everybody has
That is a quarter leg strapping.
I should try.
Alright, so we've got
I was just gonna add, yeah, we have about 10 minutes left if anybody has any other questions, but I was going to say the last piece of making the leg armor, it's still 3-dimensional now and looks like a leg. You want to start first trimming all of the plastic off so you just have the pattern. Cut the shape out of the masking tape so you just have the pattern. And then if it doesn't lay flat, like the kneecap's not going to lay flat, it'll be domed on the surface. Do little dart lines like you would in fabric on the edges of it until it lays flat. So if you cut a tiny dart and you're like, it's still really bubbly and I don't know what's happening, just cut a thicker dart line so that the whole thing is a 2-dimensional piece, and then you can put it back together 3-dimensionally.
And question for everyone. At Katsucon, we ran this as a workshop where we let you guys make your own patterns on yourselves, and like 200 people doing them all at the same time.
It was insane.
Would you picture us doing that here next year?
Yeah. It was super fun. We did a big workshop and then we're like, okay, so things to remember, like be careful when you're cutting it off with the scissors, don't go real tight with the saran wrap, and don't torque with the tape, and then immediately half the room did exactly those 3 things. No! People are cutting themselves.
There was a kid who had his arms up and he was just doing this.
And I'm like, no, we specifically said don't do that. Yeah, so it's a fun learning experience and a fun game of like, please don't. But it's a super fun workshop.
Yeah, we'll put that one in and take a check for that next year.
Cool. Any other questions?
So, what kind of paint is for something that's supposed to be
You can pretty much use any kind of paint. It's an airbrush. Airbrush is really well with flexible stuff. If you're going for an item that is specifically flexible, depends on how much flex it has. Anything that's like a crayon or a spray paint is going to have less give. Anything that you want to build up from the ground, so any acrylic paints, you water them down first, at least a 25-75 on the water side, 25 water. Those will give you the color without sacrificing the give.
So it'll be more layers of paint that way, but there's a lot more flex to it than just doing straight paint over the foam.
With chainmail, what type of metal do you use? So the chainmail dress that I made, I got a spool of 12-gauge wire, and I wrapped it around a piece of rebar, and then I clipped all of them.
And then did it one link at a time.
Yep.
Oh, your armpit tip for the chainmail, for sure.
Yes, if you're going to make chainmail, you can tell people who buy their chainmail and people who make their chainmail, because the people who buy it have never worn chainmail. There's a triangle that goes right here. The reason for that is because you have to be able to lift your arms, and if it's just a tube, you can't get any lift.
You can get about to here, and then that's it. So.
What's the thought process on 3D printing and stuff like that?
So, what was the second part?
It's like getting forces and stuff, like material and automated.
This is 3D printed.
What would you, even if you're trying to get like materials for just not just the headset, like say you're doing like a Mandalorian armor set, would you use proportioning, would you do small pieces, or would you try to do like multiple pieces?
So, the only way to do Mandalorian armor, and this goes for Mandalorian, Star Wars, anything fantasy, Halo for example, you can't 3D print the entire thing at once. So, everything has to be done in pieces. What it's going to come down to is what functional pieces do you want to wear that are going to highlight the costume. So for the Mandalorian, there are specific plating pieces on the chest, Halo chest armor, any of the Mjolnir helmets. Parts of those you can 3D print, parts of it you can do out of EVA, and you can combine those two and connect them. It's just going to be what's the threshold for which side do you want to go on, and what's your time commitment to doing it. 3D printing comes out great. It's a whole level, a different side of post-processing, and with that, there's a different time commitment that you have to take into consideration.
I don't. That's her department, because I have no patience for leveling of that on a 3D printer.
I've done a lot of 3D printing stuff, and the first thing I'll say is people always underestimate how long it'll take to print things. Like a full set of armor for a cosplay will be like
4 to 6
that's
hours.
like yeah, it's like weeks worth of printing.
This was 71 hours.
Yeah.
So cosplay armor, you're looking at
Well,
400 to 600 for a cosplay.
71 hours, but then not counting the time you had to level the bed 5 times. So
So yeah, don't skip the little things. Re-level your bed after every piece, because if it's off just a little bit, you're going to get halfway through and realize, oh,
that's not going to work.
Go back and re-level.
Given this presentation again, could you add more pictures to it?
Yes.
Yes, we can do that.
As a visual learner.
And normally we have a lot of armor pieces up here with us. We've just been running all over the place today.
Yeah, we're unfortunately on top of the parking garage, so getting here, there, and everywhere, but also carrying 3 helmets and light up staff, and I don't know, what else do we have? Another helmet?
Yeah, the helmet.
Yeah.
Any more questions? That's all you.
What?
And the foam attached to the headpieces.
So
we're going to talk about how no one wants to do this piece because it's a nightmare. And we talked a little bit about this. We've only got a couple more minutes, but the special effects workshop, we talked a little bit about how a lot of things look really cool in 2 dimensions, and then making them 3-dimensional is a nightmare or next to impossible because it geometrically doesn't make any sense. This helmet's a perfect example of that because there's a ton of pictures of it from all angles, but it's actually 65 different pieces of foam. And if you cut like any one of them slightly off, the rest of it is screwed. So it's like trying to glue together like an octagonal prism, but all of the pieces are slightly different size. And if one of them is off, all of them are off, and you have to recut the foam. So for this, it was a lot of heat treating. Like I did use floor mats because you can't really see that part when it's on my head. But it's heat treated, and then what I had to do was glue pieces of it together, stick it with straight pins and contact cement, let it completely dry, wire cut the straight pins so that they would stay in as a reinforcer, and then do it like 15 more times. So it took about 8 days of gluing and pinning and putting it back together, and there's still like, just even looking at it gives me anxiety and hives. But yeah, so if it's a project that you're looking at taking into account all the different pieces that it looks like when it's a flat geometrical shape, is a huge way to plan out how much time you're going to have to build something like that. But yeah, heat treating and contact cement and straight pins and a lot of hope.
That's the piece where my comment earlier came into play of, if you think you need this much foam, buy double.
Yeah, you're wrong if it's this helmet. That's how much foam you need.
Actually, I don't recommend anyone make this helmet, period. Just
Which is why this one is 3D printed, because someone at the end of Katsu thought, you know what, screw this helmet, I'm not going to wear this cosplay again. I'm in the background saying, you're going to regret this, and she stopped it in a video, and everyone laughed, and I was horrified, and here we are, wearing this cosplay again, and someone didn't have a helmet. So, yeah. Last minute 3D print.
What would you normally use as like an adhesive for your multi-portion 3D printing?
I'm a big fan of contact cement. I will say this about contact cement. I know a lot of people are like, ugh, I don't want to use contact cement. You have to wait the allotted amount of time, at least half of the time that it says on the bottle. A lot of people are super impatient, or they only put contact cement on one side of the surface and not both sides to stick it together. You have to glue both sides and wait for it to get tacky and dry, and then press it together, and it won't come back apart unless it's under super high stress.
So that helmet has no adhesive on it. It's pegged and uses soldered the edges of it. So I heat gun treated it and then soldered it apart so that I would just melt the pieces together.
Anything else?
It's heavy.
It's pretty heavy. Yeah, that one's a little tight on you and the parts that are cut out for your ears to go in, because like, who designs a helmet like this? This is so stupid. There's holes cut out for the ears, but when you put it on, it like puts you in a tunnel, and it's almost like you're wearing AirPods, but you've turned it on to like no sound, so you're in a weird echo chamber.
I can't hear anything at all.
Yeah, it's like it's a seashell effect while you're walking around. It's great.
Any more
Anybody
questions?
else?